Hi, I'm Kevin Carlson. I was just on Jocelyn King's podcast, Smarter Online Safety. We had a great conversation around AI, specifically around AI use and safety, how to get started and how to approach it from square one. Also talked about guardrails and keeping companies' data and processes safe to make sure that AI is not making unfortunate decisions. And then we also talked a little bit about the shared responsibility that we have to not only know how to approach AI, but how to use it in a way that does keep you and organizations safe.
Hello and welcome to the Smarter Online Safety podcast. I am your host, Jocelyn King, the Queen of Online Safety. So excited to be with you today with another great guest. You're absolutely going to love him. Kevin Carlson is a seasoned tech executive, and he's the go-to expert on AI's real-world impact inside businesses. On four different occasions, he's been either a chief technology officer or a chief information security officer, or CISO, working across different industries in North America and in Europe. So he brings a very practical, genuine viewpoint on how AI is changing business and our world. And at Tech CXO, his company, he leads the AI practice, helping companies navigate the tricky parts of getting AI up and running, which we know is a hot topic these days. His background is in building out complex software and hardware systems, and that means he really understands the nuts and bolts of data architectures and infrastructures needed for AI to work, whether it's big data, data lakes, or machine learning models. And he loves talking about the guardrails we need for AI, drawing on his security and his compliance background. And he's got plenty of success stories to share, along with a few cautionary tales. Kevin, it is so great to have you here. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Jocelyn. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to the conversation.
That's great. So I mean, every day where AI is coming up in conversations for all of us and for listeners everywhere. And I'd love for them to get your take on AI. People always ask, AI is good or bad or whatever. And unfortunately, it's not a simple yes, no answer, right? So why don't you tell us your take on AI, and then we can get into talking about how it relates to our staying safe online and in our lives.
Sure. My take on AI is that it's an amazing tool, right? And whether it's good or bad depends on how you use it and the care you take in using
Mm,
it.
mhm.
That said, it's definitely going to change a lot of things, right? It already has changed a lot of things.
Mhm.
But one of the biggest difficulties I think that people have when they start getting into AI is like, how do you separate fact from fiction? How do you separate what's real from the abundance of hype that always comes along with any new technology? So same thing happened, with blockchain, same thing happened with microservices, same thing happened with Internet 1.0, right?
Mhm.
So um, somewhere in there you have to figure out like what's hype, what's real, what's hype now that might be real later.
Right.
Um,
That's a good point. Yeah.
and how do you deal with all that, right? So, yeah, that's what my take on it is that it's complicated, and
Hmm.
but it's not so complicated that you shouldn't start using it.
Right.
There's uh, very soon, I think AI is going to be a control layer for a lot of things that we do,
Right.
and that might range from what you currently see like in cars, like a lot of heavy electronics use in cars, especially like Teslas and things like that that are doing all kinds of interesting things with AI. That's going to bleed its way into other areas of our life, maybe smart home areas, and certainly into coding and things like that. So amazing technology, but we just have to take some care with how we apply it.
That's a great point. And everybody listening knows somebody or has a family member who's looking at how AI is impacting their job, if not the person listening themselves. And it's fair to say that, like I'm based in Silicon Valley, and of course, rule of thumb is understanding how to oversee AI and leverage it in your job is the new job security moving forward rather than getting replaced by it. Do you have any thoughts on AI as something that people want to master and how to master, especially when it comes to the job market and how that's going to be affecting people, especially these days. It's such a hot topic about job security, loss of jobs, AI creating jobs, AI killing jobs, all of that. Would love your take on that.
Yeah, I'm going to start at the opposite end of where folks normally start, which is, people talk about, is my job going to be replaced? I want to talk about the leadership, right? And leadership's perspective on AI. I wrote a piece a while back that I called, a, a new term. I just came up with this term called AI positive or AI negative. And what that meant
Sorry,
was
say that again. AI positive.
versus AI negative.
Got it.
Right. And this is a leadership designation. So if you're in a company where leadership is thinking, how many people can I replace because of AI? That's AI negative, right? You're totally missing the point. You're missing the point that humans in the loop, humans have knowledge of the business that your AI is not going to have. Sure, their jobs might change,
Mhm.
but AI positive leadership looks to how can we do things differently or expand what we're doing by using AI. AI negative leadership is who can we get rid of, right? It's a
Right.
very, very short-sighted
Mhm.
approach to things. Yes, it can improve your bottom line, but there's been several examples in the past year where people have said, "Oh, I don't need developers anymore," and they, you know, let a whole bunch of developers go, and then they turned around a couple of months later and started hiring them back.
Mhm.
So this is all tied into the hype as well. Sometimes when you have non-technical leadership that doesn't really understand how the AI, how these models work and what they can really
Mhm.
do well, you operate on these assumptions, and it can be really dangerous.
You bring up a
Um,
great you bring up a great point because even ChatGPT, their head of marketing came out and did a whole talk about the fact that when they originally designed it, they were certain that they were going to be selling ChatGPT to CEOs and executives so that they could be augmenting the the finite amount of information they're getting from their leadership team and others around them so that they could really have a holistic view. They did not see it as this runaway success viral, consumer product that it became in weeks. And that's so it's fascinating because it was talking about how could we be better? How could we be more effective? How can we do things? What steps could we eliminate? It wasn't about what people can we eliminate, what steps can we eliminate, and what can we, because then we free up more time, for people. So you're really hitting on a core issue that's certainly going around the halls of Silicon Valley these days.
yeah, for sure. And if you're one of the folks that's worried about your job being replaced by AI,
Hmm.
it's more important that you start doing the hard work of rethinking what your job should be, right? And because that may not come from leadership. So, for example, if you're a developer, you're a software developer, there's models out there that can generate code and very quickly and in most cases pretty accurately. But what people aren't talking about is what it's like to use those in practice, right? So, I've done a lot of work with Claude Code, for example.
Hmm.
It's an amazing tool, right? I can sit down with a blank slate and essentially put myself into a product mindset and start describing requirements, which is a great thing to know how to do if you're a developer, by the way, anyway.
Right.
Um,
Writing a great engineering prompt is like the new skill to have, correct?
oh, absolutely, right? And I
And for
think that,
anybody listening who doesn't know, Claude.com is like ChatGPT. And except it's a little more it's deeper research. You might consider it that way. But
yeah, that's Anthropic is the company that built Claude, and they've got several models out there. Interestingly enough, to your prior point about um, having people in the loop, Anthropic just put out some recs to hire human writers to write you know marketing material and things like that. So that's kind of an admission that it's better. People writing can be better than these models. But anyway, back to the Claude Code thing. What I learned when I started working with this is that you have to be a developer to make efficient use of it. For example, in one particular session when it was writing code, it wanted to do something architecturally that I just knew was a bad idea. Right? It was gonna duplicate code. It was
right.
gonna create.
Because you've got your 10,000 hours of expertise and you know what it doesn't know.
Right. And that's really important. So in any job that you're in where you think AI might be able to do part of the job, my suggestion is to go see if you can make it do your job, right? See how much of your job that it can do well, what it does poorly. and then start to design, a way where you can sort of, like I said, rethinking the work that you need to do.
Right.
Maybe there's other things that you can do. Maybe you can handle more quantity of
Mm.
work, which would definitely improve efficiencies and things like that. But to throw your hands up and say, "Oh, AI is going to take my job," that's um, I think that's also short-sighted, and that just like, um, well, for lack of a better example, like when cars were invented. Yes,
Right.
there are still blacksmiths around, but there aren't as many of them, right?
Right. Right.
Um,
And
but
that's a great point because people, this is a pattern throughout human history,
yeah,
from I mean the internet it was the same thing and computers were the same thing and word processors over typewriters and typewriters over stenographers. I mean like you can trace this back to the caveman days, that
for
change
sure.
is going to change. When change is introduced, it's going to change the way we live and work, no doubt about it. But mastering it and becoming familiar with it is the way to go.
Absolutely. And you have to just jump in and start. And I talk to so many people that say, "Well, what do I ask it to do?" And just ask it anything. Ask it how to ask it what to do if you want to know, right? So,
Oh,
um,
wait, let's double click on that. You are so right because one of the when it first came out, the very first time I sat at one, I have a little more insider information being in the AI world in Silicon Valley, but still, most people are using AI like a Google prompt.
right,
And instead of telling it, you're an expert at this, you're that, and do this for me. And so the best thing to do is say, write a detailed engineering prompt for me to get me from here to there. Describe where you currently are and what you're trying to achieve. Like it could be a career change, it could be, a company start, it could be your big project that you have. But ask it to write the engineering prompt for you, and you're going to be so much further ahead. And most people now, people knowing they need to write engineering prompts are stumped, going, "How do I do that?" Well, ask it to do it for you. Is right.
right. Yeah, it's just part of the learning process. But the biggest barrier between someone and their ability to learn AI is generally fear. I don't know what I'm doing. I haven't done this before.
Yeah.
Jump in, just chatgpt.com or download the client for your Mac or your PC and just start using it.
Right.
But be careful because you want to make sure that you're not exposing data. Um,
Mm.
if you don't, the old was it the Samsung board meeting that ended up in ChatGPT training data
Yes.
because somebody submitted that. So you be careful what
Yeah.
you're giving
And
it.
right. And so for people who don't know, I mean, taking insider information inside your company or for whether you're a small business owner or you work inside a company or something, you can't that you have signed as an employee, you have signed agreements about what you will and won't disclose. And that includes taking anything from the company and sticking it in a chat GPT. That is verboten. That is a not to do. And there are lawsuits and terminations and all kinds of things going on about people doing that. So let's talk about this because we're definitely getting into the guardrails here. This is definitely where a lot of people are making innocent mistakes. And frankly, you brought up a great point about the fear. I think that's where the fear is. Like the people who took those Samsung notes and stuck them in were not doing it knowing what the repercussions were going to be. They did it not realizing the unintended consequences. And I think that's where a lot of people are afraid is they don't know what they don't know and they're afraid it's going to bite them. So what are the guardrails that you recommend?
Well, I think it's real simple when you first start. It's like anything you put into ChatGPT or whatever, LLM you're using, assume everybody's going to be able to see it, right?
Mm.
So if you start with that
It's
as
like
assumption,
posting pictures of yourself on Facebook. You may as well assume all 8 billion people on the planet could
right,
ultimately get access to it.
right. And while that's not the case, right, that there's a checkbox you can check that says, don't retrain the model using my data. Um, it's just a good practice to be in. Just be careful, right? But don't avoid it. It's like you know, anything else in life, like you want to go mountain biking, but you're worried you might crash. Well, just be careful, right?
Mhm.
And this is coming from someone who,
And do some research and know what equipment you want. Like wear a helmet.
I broke my collarbone a few years
Uh,
ago on a mountain bike, so I know all
yep.
about. But
Okay, there you go. Yes.
but yeah, just be careful, right? And start a little cautious, but then as you get into it, you'll learn the types of things that you can and can't do. For example, if you have a document that you want, AI to process for you, um, make sure there's no, confidential information in there, like, PII or PHI or something like that if you're in the healthcare space.
Right. And
Um,
PII for people listening is personally identifiable information. So it's anything like social security numbers or addresses or anything that is not just common public knowledge. Anything personal and confidential falls in PII.
and you can obfuscate that information, you can, redact it, you can do whatever you want with it, but just, take steps to make sure that's not in there, even if you have that privacy box, checked. Uh, Bottom line is, a developer, at OpenAI makes a mistake and that box is ignored, and it could happen. Right now, I think it's a low probability, but it could happen. So just be careful. Um, and then, like we were talking about earlier, if you really don't know how to proceed with something, just ask it, right? The amount of information that these models are trained on is staggering,
Mhm.
and it's the breadth and the depth of what they've been trained on is amazing. So
Right.
if you're struggling with trying to figure out how to get it to help you with your job, or to figure out how you can rethink your work and use AI to help you, just ask it.
Mhm.
Say, hey, this is my job. This is what I'm worried about. How can I use AI to help me with my, just ask it how to help you ask it better questions.
Mhm. One of the questions that's really good is how can I use AI to help me be a better human at my job? The stuff. So because it will tell you what AI is better at, and it'll tell you what the human is better at, and it's very intelligent that way. It really is.
It is, and most of the time, I think it's great. I think there are still current with the current models. I think there's a really good reason to have a human in the loop most of the time. We're
Mhm.
talking about these guardrails, right? Because if you're doing something really truly unique
Mhm.
that hasn't been done, it means that the model hasn't been trained on it, most likely.
Right.
So it's going to make assumptions, and it's going to, infer things.
Mhm.
People call this hallucinating, right? But it's these models come off as very confident, like they know exactly what they're talking about,
They're
and
very human this way. When if you've ever asked somebody directions and they really don't know how to get there and they give you directions anyway, that is basically what
right.
what AI does on a regular basis.
Yeah, one of the things that I started doing a while back is I said, in my uh, sort of general guidelines that I give to a model, like how to work best with me, which you can set up in sort of the settings area of most of these models. I
Mhm.
tell it that if something isn't directly pulled from a fact that it knows, or from a reliable source,
Mhm.
label it as inference, or a hypothesis. So I know as I'm reading through it, it'll have that little label next to it. So I know.
Mhm.
And that's pretty helpful, if as long as it's right. But
And I have in my engineering prompt for it, always give me a citation. I want cited sources all the time and known good sources. And then I also double check it, even when I've said that, and it gives me information. I will take in feedback, say, please give me footnote citations on all of these. And it comes back and says, well, this isn't quite right. We have to change it. And if you really want to have fun, sometimes put Claude's results in chat and chat results in Claude or Gemini or any of the just have one, just like you have two people with opinions or two employees, you have them both review each other's work, and that gets very interesting very quickly.
it does. And I think I guess on the larger topic of guardrails in general, that we touched on earlier, guardrails aren't just having humans in the loop. That's an important piece.
Hmm.
AI can process so much information so quickly that if you have to have a human in the loop looking at everything, then it's kind of a bottleneck. So there are component libraries available for code. Like if you're integrating AI into your workflows in the business, then implementing some sort of programmatic guardrail. For example, like let's say you have a policy that you want to make sure there's um, nobody's writing a prompt that is pulling back information on a competitor, just for example.
Hmm.
Then you can create these guardrails that sort of wrap uh, the um, the code that's calling the AI. It'll look at what comes back, and it'll look for certain keywords. It'll look for certain meanings and flag it if there's an issue. And these
Hmm.
tools are all coming along pretty quickly, but it's a very definite need. If we're going to use AI as a sort of control layer to be able to
Hmm.
do so many things, we have to have both human guardrails and programmatic guardrails in place to make sure that for example, you don't have AI make a mistake and move millions of dollars from your bank account to the wrong place, right? So it's I think that's going to be a growing sector of sort of AI work in general is really
Hmm.
this guardrail piece and how do companies protect themselves from uh, you know making a poor decision um, based on AI.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was talking to an AI lawyer earlier today, and it's like, oh my gosh, proliferation of what's happening in the legal sphere because of assumptions and lack of guardrails and these things not being in place yet. This is a very active time. So we're going to see a lot. And then like with every other time in human history, there'll be a normalization period that we're coming into. We're nowhere near that, but it will happen in the future. So you bring up a good point. So let's talk as we're talking about we've talked about risk and we've talked about guardrails, but now let's talk about how it all relates to safety and security. So
Okay?
what do you see as the biggest AI positive and AI negative with cybersecurity and AI?
Gosh, I think there's some great use cases for AI in security. Um, some have been in place already for years, just using what we used to call machine learning, right?
Mhm.
And machine learning is sort of a subset of the overall AI world, but there are simple algorithms that can be used to spot anomalies, for example, in log files.
Mhm.
Um,
So, like
there
for
can,
instance, in a banking app, right? Like if you normally have a cadence of how you deposit or draw money, and all of a sudden there's an outlier. Is that where you're going?
correct,
Yeah.
correct. So there's some entry in a log somewhere that doesn't match the history, and so you train these things on the history essentially. So that's been in place for a long time. But I think that there's even more now where not only can you recognize a problem, but you can use things like Model Context Protocol or MCP to actually take the anomaly and deal with it through MCP. So, for example, if you have let's say you have an MCP server that can connect to AWS, right, and make changes,
For
and
Amazon, Amazon
yeah,
Web Services. Yeah.
and then you see there's a log entry where somebody attempted to access a machine through an open port that shouldn't be open, right? You can spot that, and then you could tell the MCP agent we need to close that port, and it can actually go do it, right? So um, it's I think there's the AI positive piece is looking for those opportunities. The AI negative piece to me is assuming that AI is going to do it all. So like the AI would enable security companies to run a completely virtual non-human staff SOC or security operations center. I think
Hmm.
that's irresponsible at this point. Right? The
Right.
models might get better, but we're not there yet, right? So let's. I know it's exciting to talk about, being able to be one person, write all the code, stand up this software, run a whole company, and never have anybody else. That's all exciting stuff. But it's completely impractical right now
Right.
for businesses of any scale.
Hmm. No,
Uh,
that's a great example and very timely related to this. Especially, a lot of people are concerned. Well, for instance, with all the government uh, changes, and the eliminations of roles of security people helping to protect the U.S. and its national institutions. There's concern there, for obvious reason about like how is it more efficient or do we are we missing important steps to make sure we stay safe? Not to get into a whole topic on that, and I'm not trying to go into definitely don't want to go into politics, but just from the standpoint of eliminating certain things in security, there's definitely an opportunity, as you were talking about. AI can automate a lot of things, and then it can make the SOC team, more efficient and better at identifying. risk and things like that. What else do you see as the other part of this is having AI tools in the hands of cyber criminals, and you see the results of that. But you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's just, any type of technology that comes out, you're going to have bad actors, right? This was going on before the internet. You know,
Right.
it there's always viruses, malware, worms, all kind of stuff that you could very easily get on an air-gapped PC, right? That then would monitor like everything you're doing, and then the second you connect it or something, it would send information back or
Mhm.
uh, do something nefarious to the computer that you're using, right? So this stuff's been around for years, and um, yes, it's making certain types of attacks a lot easier. So you're seeing like for example, phishing attacks, phishing attempts. The emails are getting better. The emails
Mhm.
are getting smarter. I got one the other day. I've seen it a bunch. It's something like uh, your SendGrid account, which I don't have, right? Your SendGrid account is the authorization's failing or something's failing, and it was like log in, and it was a completely random URL, and a lot of people don't check this stuff.
Right. So it's
That's
sending you to a bad link so that you'll give your credentials to it, and then the bad guys will have your login credentials and they can take over your account.
and that's one reason I just have to say this. Like, it's one reason to use multi-factor authentication on every system you use.
Thank you. Yes, we say ditto to that here. It's Smarter Online Safety.
The most frequent way that hackers get into systems is through social engineering, right? Sure, there's other ways, but people will willingly give up their credentials um, to hackers if they think there's some sort of emergency that they've got to go take care of,
Right.
right? And it's important to be very diligent and know what to look for. So, yes, AI is making this easier for hackers, but it's also it can make it easier for those of us receiving these attacks. Like you can take the email text, run it through ChatGPT and say, should I be concerned about this?
Hmm.
If you wanted to do that. Um,
And by the
but
way, that's one of the best uses you can have because it'll spot that the URL is one character off, or like, and you know this, but some of our listeners don't, but you could classically take Amazon.com and make the M an R followed by an N, which on your phone in a text could look like an M, an R. So all that little spoofing of things, or using an L instead of, or a one instead of an L, or an I instead, and all of like uppercase I instead of an L, all that swapping out characters to make it look almost right is how a lot of people lose thousands, tens of thousands, and hundreds of thousands of dollars.
it's true. A relative of mine just a few months ago uh, got a call from who he assumed was his bank, right?
Mm.
And gave up their login credentials and
Over the phone?
over the phone. And fortunately, decided to call the bank right afterwards.
Hmm.
There had been a wire initiated, and they were able to shut it down and all that kind of stuff. So these things happen a lot, and
Right.
you just unfortunately you can't trust them, right? You have to look at emails with a degree of skepticism,
Right.
even if the name in the from line is somebody you know, right? Because they could spoof the email address easy enough. So you just have to be careful. And this is no different than say, um, well, I'll use the mountain biking metaphor again, right? It's no different than going mountain biking. This really cool trail you want to go on, but if you have to operate within your skill level, right? So,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it's the same thing with AI. Operate within your skill level, and make sure that you're employing it in a way that not only you understand, but you're pretty sure is going to be safe, meaning that you're not uploading personal information and things like that.
Right. And I just absolutely love that cybersecurity online safety tip of take whatever you've got and put it in AI and ask it, is this safe?
And eventually these things are going to be built into email clients, and
Right.
to some degree they already are. Google Workspace and
Right.
Microsoft, Office
I mean,
365.
99, what's scary for people is that 99% of it is already filtered out. This is just the part that's getting through, right? That's, yeah.
And there's always going to be some that gets through because hackers don't stop innovating, and neither can
Right.
we. So we
Right.
have to change to kind of keep up, And
Yep.
it's sort of an unfortunate cycle, but um, it's actually kind of helpful, right? It keeps you on your toes, keeps you
Hmm.
vigilant. And as the hackers get better at things, we get better in responding to them.
Right. Yes, and I agree. And I think that a lot of people, are waiting for the government and the big corporations, to, figure out how to use AI to combat the AI and the bad actors' hands and stuff. And, one of the things I'll often say is, yes, there are things that need to get done at that level, but like you don't wait for the government or a company to come in and lock your doors and windows and close your garage door for you in your house, but everybody's kind of expecting that, online. And when you start looking at it differently and think, gone are the days when you don't have to understand your own online tech and footprint enough to be able to keep yourself safe. It just
Agreed.
like you do with your locks on your, once upon a time, locks and deadbolts were a new technology that people had to learn. Some of our ancestors, saw them for the first time and went, well, this is strange. This is weird. And now we take it for granted. And I think, we're there with AI and with cyber safety. So that practical tip, and you've said two really powerful things. MFA on everything. I mean, even Microsoft said when they were looking at the credential stuffing attacks, 99 over 99.9% of them would not have happened if people had had MFA turned on. So the ones that got through were from the people who weren't using multi-factor authentication, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I joke around a little bit. It's like I tell people that the reason I retire is I just get tired of MFA. Um, I mean, it is an extra step, and when you're in the consulting world like I am, I have access to a number of systems, and sometimes scrolling to find the right code in like Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator, I can go on for pages, right? So,
Right,
um, but it's a necessary pain, right? If you want to
right.
be safe, it's nowhere near the pain of experiencing a real attack.
And as
Uh,
somebody who went through one and lost, a retirement account and lost my health and lost just, days out, I lost years out of my life. That's how it felt. And I've spoken to so many people who have lost everything and had to file bankruptcy because of things and all of this. If even if you said I have to spend an extra 3 minutes a day doing this, or even if it was 10 minutes a day, it's worth it compared to, what you're putting off. It's like it takes an extra effort to put your seatbelt on too.
us,
But
yeah.
think of the consequences of not doing it. So I love the practicality you're bringing into it.
It's like the metaphor I use a lot is, Ford will build you a car and sell it to you, but they're not going to teach you how to drive it, right? That's your
Mm.
responsibility.
Oh, that's a good one. Yes, yes.
And it's a responsibility that you have to assume because it's not just your safety you're concerned with, it's everybody else's too, right? So it's the same thing with AI. If you're putting data into AI that could harm somebody, then that's not a good decision, right? Especially if the data got out. But um, yeah, it's a shared responsibility model, like so many things.
Yeah. Oh, that is so awesome. So tell people a little bit more about what you do and how, and how they could reach you.
Sure. I do fractional executive work with a company called TechCXO, as you mentioned. I've been a partner there for about 7 years, and I split my time pretty equally between fractional CTO work and fractional CISO work. I
Mhm.
also do executive coaching, really focused on technology leadership and rising leadership within companies. Love working with folks to help improve their path and get them where they want to be. That's a lot of fun. Uh, a lot of the work that I'm doing these days is centered around AI, and I think I might have mentioned to you this in a prior conversation, but really where I focus a lot on is education,
Mhm.
and kind of moving past the hype. Where's a good place for people to start? How can we do this safely? How can we start with a pilot or a proof of concept that's going to show us whether or not this is going to work and still give
Mhm.
us some value? Um, you probably saw the MIT study that came out a while ago that said 95% of these efforts are failing. I understand there's some of that's been refuted, but it's a lot that are failing, and it's often because companies bite off a little bit more than they should for a
Right.
first step. So a lot of the work I do is helping companies understand uh, what they could do with AI based on not only their business but the data that they have.
Mhm.
some of the systems they have in place, the workflows that need to happen, and finding places where it'd be really good to start, and then building out a proof of concept. Sometimes starting with a commercial tool like a ChatGPT or a Claude or something similar, and then building on it, iterating on that over time to get them to a place where they're comfortable with the speed and the accuracy and the privacy around the entire setup. So it's been a lot of fun. I myself have been involved in the AI world since about 2014. Like I said, we just called it machine learning back then, pretty
Right.
much.
Right.
Working
I
with a
was
lot
doing
of
that. Yeah, I was in machine
yeah,
learning back in the day. And and we kind of saw this coming, but not as fast as we thought it was going to be. So,
yeah. It was really this was a huge change, right? Absolutely enormous change, and nobody really thinks about the old machine learning models that much anymore. And that's one of the big misconceptions that I think is out there, that people think, oh, all the ML stuff is gone, and we can do everything with an LLM. Well, an LLM is not great at everything. And something you might be able to build out with, say, like a simple regression or, say, like a random forest or a decision tree, it might be more accurate and a lot faster and cheaper than using an LLM. So maybe the day will come where we have these big models that can do everything and do it really, really fast.
mhm.
But I think it's important not to forget that there's other tools out there,
That's right. You don't have to go all in on just one way of doing it.
right?
That's awesome.
But yeah, so
So for Kevin, so for people who want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach you or follow you?
you can follow me on LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn/in/slash Kevin Carlson. I
Awesome.
also write a Substack blog at kevincarlson.substack.com, and I'm starting a new newsletter on LinkedIn as well called the Executive Shift. It's really focused on tech leadership development.
That's fantastic. That's great. Well, thank you so much for your insights, your great practical tips from the trenches and where cybersecurity and AI converge, especially for all of us in everyday life. Thank you for being here. What a great conversation. So appreciated this. And for everybody out there, you got some great tips, that you can implement right now. And thank you to Kevin Carlson. And for all of you out there, until next time, stay safe, stay sane, and stay ahead of the bad guys.